Hello and welcome to Planning for the Unexpected, a series presented by the Older Women's Network of New South Wales. And this is episode 6 of our series, and you can find the other 5 episodes on the Older Women's Network YouTube channel. Well, today our topic is all about downsizing. Perhaps you're thinking about it, perhaps you've done it. Well, keep watching. And our special guest today is Jane Caro, and Jane has downsized and she's lived to tell the tale. Now, downsizing is a pretty big life decision, so if you're contemplating it, do make sure you get professional advice because our discussion today is really general. And if you've got a comment, a question, or maybe even a tip, pop it into the chat box and we'll do our best to respond to it if you're watching the program live. Well, as usual, our special guest, our expert guest, is Alice Mantel. And Alice is a lawyer specialising in family law and elder law, and she's the author of Every Woman's Guide to Retirement, which has a chapter all about housing. Welcome, Alice.
Hi, Amanda. Good to be joining you again today.
Now, Alice, downsizing is a topic that many older people have opinions on, or they're thinking about it, contemplating it. It's kind of in the ether, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it really is a topic of interest. And I suspect that the reason for that is that there's a lot of pressure on baby boomers to give up their housing to make way for younger people.
Yes, in the context of the housing crisis, and it really is a crisis, yes, there is both overt and subtle pressure on people to kind of make way, move out of their big houses for younger families. And the commentary really stresses how expensive houses are now and how baby boomers kind of had it easier.
Yeah, well, it's certainly not my recollection of what it was like when I bought my first house. In the days that when I bought it, which was, in the 70s, late 70s, banks basically would not lend to single women at all without a guarantor. And then the loan itself was limited to 4 times your income, which at that time I thought I was doing pretty well. I was earning about $15,000 a year, which was the average male wage then. And I remember, because when I started to look for a house, that people would say, every week that you delay in buying a house, the house price would go up another $1,000 in that week. So everybody was in a big rush to buy something, so I don't see it as being that easy at all.
Well, we know now that it's almost impossible for younger people to get into the housing market unless they have support from their families or they're very wealthy. But there are ways baby boomers can benefit towards their super by selling their houses, isn't there? There's the downsizer super benefit, where I think you can put up to $300,000 into your superannuation, and that can make a really big difference to your retirement.
Yeah, and provided you've owned your own house for 10 years, that's available to you. But I think you're right, Amanda, in that the other pressure on baby boomers is to assist with that deposit for their children to be able to buy something. So say if a child wants to buy an average priced house in Sydney, which might be close to $1 million, they're going to need 20%, so say roughly $200,000. How else can you do that except if the parents sell their house and downsize and free up some cash which they give to their children?
Yeah, that's a huge amount of money to save up, isn't it?
Yep.
Now, I guess, look, the common refrain when people start talking about this is that it's actually really hard to find anything suitable if you want to sort of stay in the area that you like, that you live in currently.
Yeah, I think it's part of my dilemma. I live in a big old house with a big garden, but it's very conveniently located. And so my dilemma is, where would I move in my similar area which has the same facilities? And I also think that people shouldn't be in a big hurry to downsize if they really don't want to move. There are obvious advantages to staying in the home and the area that you know, where you've got social connections and you know how to use all the services. In my case, having a garden means that I get a bit of exercise sometimes. And I can I can be in nature, I can watch things grow. And what's more, I could still age in place. That is, I could get home services provided to me that allow me to stay in my home, for example, cleaning or gardening. And that means that I could stay there for quite a bit longer.
Now, there is a financial way of being able to stay in your own home and having a bit more cash to pay for those repairs and to supplement your income, and it's called the Home Equity Access Scheme. Now, this is a government program where you can apply for a non-taxable loan against your house, and you can, borrow up to a certain amount of money and pay a moderate interest, I think. A friend of mine did this, and it's not very well known or understood. It's complex, but that has given him some income to help his daughters with their HECS debts and a little bit more income to make his life more comfortable. So that's an option.
Yeah, I've heard of this scheme. Yeah, I think you have to be eligible for the loan, and the actual amount itself is limited. But you've got to secure it against your house. But if you wanted some extra cash flow, I think it's a good idea.
Now, Alice, back to your dilemma. Now, I know you're pretty fit. You go to the gym, but what about if you reach the point where looking after your garden is getting difficult, that it's getting difficult to manage repairs? Well, what about a seed change or a tree change or something smaller?
Yeah, I think about that. I think that's one of the advantages of retirement. It actually is an opportunity for people who've always wanted to move to a nice beach town or into the country or somewhere, and to do something that they've always wanted to do. And I guess in the pandemic years, that certainly happened. A lot of people who were able to work remotely moved out into those nice towns and were able to continue working. And they had a nice house while they were there. And the sort of house that they had and the lifestyle they had was certainly out of reach if you lived somewhere like Sydney.
Yes, so, ocean views, beach walks, it does sound very appealing.
It certainly does. But there are all a few downsides to living in regional areas, and I'm just making a general comments here. For one thing, you don't have the social connections that you had in your own community. It takes a while to build that up. And there are other things which are not going to be the same as in a big city. For example, particularly medical services, big hospitals and specialists that can provide medical care, which is much more likely as you get older, you're more likely to need specialist medical care. And then, there might be educational institutions. You might want to go and study. You may not be able to do that. And then one of the really basic things is having good internet coverage. You'll find that as soon as you get away from those towns, you're not going to be able to get that coverage. I think that if you want to do that sort of sea change opportunity to take that step, you need to do it as soon as you can when you retire. It's not something you want to leave till, late retirement.
Yes, so you've got time to build new social connections because that's so important as you age.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, I guess what you're saying really is timing is really important in making this big decision as to whether you make a big move out of the city.
Or not, yeah. Well, as I say, I think that if you've always wanted to do it, it'll probably be fairly easy. You might have children that live somewhere else and you might want to go and live with them. But I think the decision in downsizing generally is made when we face a personal crisis of one sort. For example, we lose our partner, or we have a health crisis which suddenly makes it very unlikely, or we just don't want to live where we've been living for years. And that makes it a lot easier to do the move.
Now, we hear at OWN that some women are experiencing family pressure to downsize. Family members might be concerned about, your ability to cope, but they also might see that perhaps there might be some financial benefit for them in a parent downsizing while they're still alive.
Oh, yeah. I'm afraid that inheritance impatience is a real thing. And in one sense, I don't disagree with that, because I think being able to help your children while to be independent and to be financially able to get on with their lives while you are alive and able to do so, it's much better than leaving it to them in your will, and you might live for many, many years before they can get the benefit of that income. But there certainly are those occasional entitled children who pressure their parents to move out of their house and into villages or aged care homes, and with the intention of benefiting from that move.
Well, what can be done to resist that kind of pressure?
Look, I'm into the idea that having a good friend who's always there if your kids are coming, so that they are there to witness what's going on. Coercive control is really hard to prove. You really don't want to make enemies of your children, because there's not going to be anyone else to look after you as you are unable, if you get to the point where you're unable to make your own decisions. Becoming more frail and more dependent is one of the inevitable aspects of aging, and therefore you're much more susceptible to being pressured by children. There are agencies where you can make complaints, for example, but you have to be in a position where you can go and make that complaint, and that might be hard to do.
Yes, that's a very difficult scenario. Now, the other thing we're hearing more about is that people are getting into retirement, finishing work, and they're still paying off a mortgage on a lower income, and that is a very tricky situation to be in, but it's increasingly common.
Of course, when house prices keep rising, you keep having to borrow more and more money. And therefore, that's certainly the statistics on this are quite clear. There's no doubt that retirement for most people means a fairly major reduction in income. So having a mortgage is one of the things you really don't want to have, because mortgage, as we have experienced just recently, mortgage rates keep on increasing, and we're susceptible to those changes in interest rates. And I think from a personal point of view, when I was thinking about retirement, paying out my mortgage was really a major concern for me when I thought I'm going to be stopping work full time. And I thought I would just have so much mental strain if I had to continue to pay out a mortgage at the same time when I have a very limited source of income coming up.
So by downsizing, you might be able to eliminate that mortgage, and that's a really good objective.
Yeah.
Now, what about the suggestion, from a family member that you sell your house and then you contribute that to your child, and then they put up a granny flat in the back of their house and you live there and they can support you as your needs increase, perhaps? What about that idea?
Look, I know this can be a really tempting option, and there's no doubt that in some families it would work perfectly well. Certainly in some cultures that would be the acceptable thing to do. But my personal view on this is that it's not such a great idea in a long term. Let's just look at the scenario. You're living in the granny flat and your child or your child's partner gets an offer of a great job in a different city. What are you going to do? Move out with them? Where are you going to live? Are you going to go with them or are you going to stay? Giving a large amount of money to your child is likely to affect your pension entitlements, so you need to think about that as well if you're on the pension. And, the other alternative is what happens if your child's relationship breaks down and therefore they lose half of their house for whatever reason. What happens then? You've lost your main asset, they have nowhere to live, and it's a difficult time. And as I say, I think it's an option that I'm very reluctant to recommend.
Now, Alice, earlier you mentioned, you have a house with a big garden. So say, I've worked up to the decision of downsizing. What are the features of my house or any house where you might think, oh, this is going to be problematic in the future?
Yeah. Look, this being close to shops and public transport and medical facilities is really important. I still think that's the main thing that we need to think about rather than the wide open spaces. But one of the things that really starts to press on people's minds as they get older, if they have, like I do, a big house that needs repairs, like roofs and gutters, and these are really substantial expenses, in the cost of them. I'm thinking, do I really want to spend that kind of money? So the most logical choice for a lot of people is to move into something smaller that they can manage more easily, which has still those options of being close to shops and services.
Okay, so, a house on one level. Yep. Accessible bathroom, that kind of thing. Is that the sort of they're the sort of features you're looking for?
I think because a lot of older houses have lots of stairs, they have big gardens, they're difficult to get to. They may not be close to public transport. But I think when you start to look for a new place, a smaller place to downsize to, you would not look for a townhouse. Even though it's very appealing because it's got stairs, and the fact is, as we get older, our ability to manage stairs becomes significantly less. So we're looking for level access or a place with a lift so we can get into it. And then there are some things that people, some people might want. I really want a view. That's what I want. I really want a view. That's not so important for me, but I really want a big balcony because I would like to be able to live outside, be able to sit outside, have a little garden outside. That's the sort of thing that I would want.
So these features you're describing in an apartment, aren't you?
Yeah.
And that is very different from owning a house.
Yeah, look, there's no doubt about it. If you're coming from a big house to strata, it is a very different experience. You're moving into a community, and the decisions that have to be made in a strata block have to be made by everyone, especially around such issues as making repairs. And this can be very fraught.
Yes, that can be incredibly expensive, can't it? And how does that actually work in a strata situation? If a repair has to happen in a strata building?
They have to have levies. So every strata block will have its own levies. Now, what you need to do is when you first go and look at a strata block, you go and look at the general area. Do you like it? Does it have public services, that you want to have, like shops and buses and drains and that kind of thing? But the first thing you really need is a strata report. So there are companies that go out there getting a strata report. Strata report is basically, it will give you information about all the minutes the strata committee has held during the past year, a couple of years. It will tell you what the levies are going to be for each unit, because they vary according to the unit, and it will tell you if they are considering making repairs in the future, which might require a special levy. So a special levy is an additional levy. You really need to read that report very carefully to tell you what are the issues. Do the residents get on with each other, or are they, constantly locked in war? And the other thing I would actually recommend is getting a building report as well, which it's not just about the building itself, it's also about your particular unit. So you may or may not be aware that a strata block is divided into common property, those areas that everybody can access, and then your own property, your personal property. So things like the garden, the car park, the hallways, they are common property, but internally there is your own property. There is your own property, and you're responsible for the repairs for that.
So I have heard of a case, a friend. We've had a lot of rain, and there was this incredible flood kind of into the car park underneath the building, and it was thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars that they had to contribute through a special levy. Now, I guess it's hard to anticipate some of those issues, so you really have to interrogate all of those things that you talked about, the strata report, going through all the minutes, to make sure there's, for clues that there may be issues.
Yeah, and you really don't know. I mean, that you're giving a classic example of things that you cannot predict. Some things are visible at the beginning. For example, my daughter was interested in buying a townhouse, and we didn't get the strata report. She was just about to put down the deposit, and the strata report came and they said, "Oh, you read it." So I did, and I said, "But hang on, they're intending to strike a special levy because they had a basement, and it looked like it was going to fall down, a fairly major repair." And I said, "Look, you could do this, but this levy is going to be at least $10,000 for you personally, at least. And, there's also, this might be an ongoing issue. You need to think about that." And a building report, I know a lot of people don't believe in getting building reports for strata blocks, but I have always got them. I was interested in buying an apartment, which I did get a building report for, and I looked at the bathroom. It said that there is a leak in the bathroom. It looked perfectly fine for me. I am not an expert. I do not know. But when they said there's bubbling on the outside, so in the inside of the wall, the tiles were fine. But when you looked on the outside wall, there was bubbling coming out through the plaster. So that told me that there was a leak in the pipes, and it was a negotiating aspect when I was thinking about buying that place.
So it's a fixable thing.
It is a fixable,
but you're just not sure how much it would cost to.
Oh no, not at all.
To do that.
And the other thing is you cannot do a repair in a strata block without getting approval from the strata committee, because there are a lot of unauthorised repairs. So in my case, with that repair, I had to have a bylaw change. That cost me. I had to pay for somebody else's legal expertise to write a fairly ordinary bylaw to say that I would be responsible. I could do the change to the bathroom, but if it went wrong, I was responsible for fixing it at a later stage. So there are additional costs even in buying a strata unit, although the initial price might be a lot less.
So we've talked about special levies, but do you also have to pay a quarterly fee, don't you?
Yeah.
For maintenance of the garden, or if there's a swimming pool, that can be quite expensive too.
They can. Look, I'm not too sure about the range of levies these days. So every strata unit has both a quarterly levy or an annual levy, a strata levy, and then you'll be responsible for council rates and water rates, just like you would for an ordinary a house, freestanding house. There are still council rates that are payable, but they're a lot less than for a house. So the range of levies, I would say in Sydney, you would be unlikely to get a unit with less than $700 a quarter. Would be an average. It would be a very low levy. I would have thought somewhere around about $1,000 to $1,200 a quarter. And there, if you have things like a swimming pool, it could be as much as $2,500 a quarter. So you need to be very well informed about that. How are you going to pay for that kind of levy? And then, as I say, the special levies where you've got the flooding of the basement, you don't know when that's coming. So you're up for that as well.
Yes, it is very different from owning a house. So yes, you need to research it thoroughly. So wouldn't it be easier or simpler to maybe just buy into a retirement village? Because they're heavily advertised. Is that an option?
Oh, look, yes. You need to think about what do we do when we mean a retirement village, because there are quite a few options in that space. Basically, retirement village is buildings made, either strata units or villas, that are residences for retired people. There are also other terms. There are lifestyle resorts, there are over 55 resorts. They may or may not be covered by the retirement village legislation. And you've got to distinguish it. It is not a nursing home, right? So there's no nursing assistance available generally, unless you want to pay extra for it. The idea is that a retirement village is intended to be for people who can live independently. It can be a residential, whole block, or it can be a collection of villas, or it can be mobile homes in a car park. And it is quite a complicated legal system that you might get into.
Yes, and we've certainly seen some media coverage recently of people who have really financially lost out by buying into retirement villages. But they are advertised as being, places where, happy grey-haired people are sitting around having barbecues and, generally having a great time together.
And I think that is really one of the big appeals for a retirement village, is that it has communal facilities as well as independent living. And there is no doubt that a lot of people really want that, So I've looked at some of them, and they have nice indoor swimming pools, they have communal dining rooms, they have buses that are organised for big excursions. But let me just say, one of the interesting things about that media coverage that you're talking about is that they targeted their marketing towards three kinds of buyers: Miss Lonely, Miss Homely, or Miss Sporty. So I mean, is that cynical? Very cynical, I think.
Absolutely.
But the problem with retirement villages, in a way, is that there are different options. Some of them are straight out strata units, that you just buy a strata unit. Some of them are leasing only operations, and some of them are called land lease operations. Now, the media coverage that you're talking about was a land lease operation. That is where you are leasing the land from the operator, but you're actually paying for the house. You actually own the house. So this is an interesting problem, because if you stop paying the leasing fees, what are you going to do with the house? You know, you're likely to lose the house as well. And as far as I know, the prices for leasing, the charges for leasing the land are really quite high. To my view, that's the way you've got to find out about it is when you start to look at a village, you would be given a series of disclosure documents which will tell you about the prices that you're going to be charged for everything.
So legal advice, absolutely essential.
Absolutely.
If you're buying into a retirement village. And also you need to be aware that, like strata, you are paying out quarterly fees, maybe weekly fees, and these may increase over time.
Yeah, usually they increase at a rate of CPI. And like a strata unit, every retirement village does have its own committee that can agree with those rises in fees or not. The advantage, I guess, is that if you pay those fees, you don't have to do any of the maintenance. So if you've got a pool or lawns or something, somebody else looks after that. The operator of the retirement village will look after that. Most of these costs all of these costs will actually be disclosed in the disclosure documents that you are given. These can be about 20 pages long, so you actually need professional advice before you go into the retirement village scenario. You need to be aware of the ingoing contribution, the ongoing contribution rates, that's the weekly maintenance, and then the deferred management fees, that's the exit fees. These can really be quite a lot. And you need to have a lawyer explain those things to you.
Oh, yes, definitely. And the other thing you mentioned was that retirement villages don't really offer, aged care services, so that you might need to consider selling at some point and making that next move to a nursing home.
Yeah.
But you then have to, I suppose, you have to sell the unit or the townhouse or villa, and you also have to have enough money to pay the deposit for the nursing home.
I think this can be very problematic, actually. The thing is, it depends on the terms of the contract that you have with the operator. So quite often, the operator will say, well, we are the people who are going to sell your unit. And until the property, your unit or your villa is sold, you need to keep on paying maintenance fees. So you might be looking at very long periods of time before that sale occurs. We're talking about a year where you are continuing to pay maintenance fees of, say, $250 a week for a year because it's not been sold. And then there are issues about how much of the capital gain will the operator take. It can be as much as 30%, 50% of the capital gain. Again, so you might be left with very much less than what you came in with, and then you have to pay the deposit in as for the refundable accommodation deposit for the nursing home, which you may not be enough at that point.
That's right, and you may need to come up with the money reasonably quickly, and it may take a while to sell your unit in the retirement village.
Yeah.
So that's to consider as well. Well, so far, Alice, I think we've talked about, staying in place, aging in place. We've talked about looking at strata, an apartment. We've talked about retirement villages. But now I'd like to introduce our guest, Jane Caro. And Jane has downsized and she's lived to tell the tale. Jane is a broadcaster, a writer and an advocate. Many of you will know her. Welcome, Jane.
Hi, Amanda. I'm very happy to be here.
Now, Jane, what was it that prompted you to sell your family home, the place I guess you've lived in for most of your adult life?
Yeah, 35 years we lived there. And we bought it as a, renovator's dream. It really was. We discovered that the kitchen sink was actually just depositing water straight under the house. The pipes had all moved. So, we did it up slowly over time. But it was a very comfortable house. We'd lived there a long time. We were very much part of the community and the street in particular. We had a lot of friends there and kids had gone to school at the local school. It was very much part of our lives. And, we people talked about downsizing a lot and we thought, oh, maybe not. But then, we're very fortunate. My husband's a cattle breeder, so we have a property in the country in the Upper Hunter. And it did seem like we just had too much space. We had a big garden in our Artarmon and then, 300 acres with cattle on it in the Upper Hunter. And so we thought, well, this is silly. And there was a lot of money locked up in that house, And so, and there were little things like we'd look at it and think, we probably have to spend some money on it soon. It was getting to that point. And we thought, do we want to? Is it the right time for us to be doing that? Not really. And the brush turkey. The brush turkey had a lot to do with driving my husband out because my husband loves his garden and had made it very beautiful. And the brush turkey and he were fighting a bitter war over maintaining the garden. And I think that because he was much more wanting to stay than me. And I think the brush turkey actually made him think, no, I can't stand this anymore. I can't stand watching my garden being ripped apart. So we went looking.
So aside from the brush turkey, because I can hear that's such a big factor, did you feel a kind of societal pressure that, you shouldn't be occupying a big family house, that really, a family with younger children really, really, really should belong to there?
Yeah, there was that, absolutely. But of course, we ended up selling it to a single man, a divorced man. He does have a son, but the son comes and goes, So I don't know that in the end is actually a realistic feeling. And also, if you live in a suburb like ours, like when we bought into it, it was a very inexpensive place to buy and live. 35 years ago, things were very different. But now, I don't know how many families with small children could afford it. It was ridiculous what's happened to prices. So that was there, certainly, a sense of, we're too overindulged and privileged and we really should downsize. So, yes. But also a sense of wanting to lessen the responsibilities. I mean, I joke about the brush turkey. Not really. I'm not really joking. He really was angry. But it was symbolic of the fact that there was a lot to do and a lot to take care of and a lot that needed, fixing and all that kind of thing. And did we really have not just the energy, but the will, the desire? And so we were lucky. We quite quickly found the place that just felt like it was exactly right for us. And it was a 3-bedroom semi, so much smaller, but with a nice little garden because we do like gardens. And so we were able to sell the big house and buy the small one. And the nice thing about that, and why I say to people, honestly do think about it, is because that money that we liberated out of our big house enabled us to help our daughters with their crushing mortgages, and I know the bank of mum and dad is a problem. It's one of the things that's driving the house prices up, of course. But what do you do when you've got, children with grandchildren and they're absolutely doing it so tough? So that was nice to be able to do. And it also gave us a bit more financial security rather than having it locked up in a house which, we were going to have to start spending even more money on, so that kind of the opposite way than letting somebody else younger and, all of that kind of thing take on the house and do what they wanted to do with it. And I have to say, people said, oh, did you find it hard leaving? No, we did not. And, well, my husband did a little bit. He was a bit more sentimental than I was. I actually, once we've gone, I've kind of moved on completely. I love the new place. And I don't even really particularly want to go back there. Like it's not my house anymore. And it's a lovely memory from the past.
But you said you had really good friends and good neighbours. So did you want to sort of stay in that area to keep that sense of community?
We haven't moved particularly far. We've literally moved to the next suburb, which is really nice. In fact, the suburb in which my oldest daughter lives. So we're actually closer to her and my grandchildren, or our grandchildren. And we're still close enough to stay in contact with our friends and, go to the local Japanese restaurant and meet up with them and all that kind of thing. So we've really got the best of both worlds, I think, and so much less to look after, and a house that was somebody had spent a lot of money fixing before they sold it. So we now don't have to spend any money fixing.
So, yeah, that's really important. So you don't have to spend money. The maintenance has all been done. What were the other things you were looking for in this smaller house?
I guess I was looking for something that was closer to things so that we could walk more. We were always big walkers, but we'd be able to do almost everything we do in our neighbourhood we now walk to. So I walk to the library. We can walk to the local supermarket. We can walk to cafes and restaurants and, all around the area, to my daughter's house, and so I wanted that feeling of not always having to getting the car out. So a little bit more of I guess, an inner city, a more urban neighbourhoody vibe, which we've definitely got. And yeah, I was looking for that, and I was looking for something. I mean, when you look for a house, it is an emotional purchase. I was looking for something that made me go, oh, yeah, I love this place. I want to live here. And that when we walked through the front door, that's what we felt. And it's small, much smaller than the old place, but it's been really well fitted out and done. And I did want an older house. I like houses with character and patina and stories to tell, and it's a Federation semi, so we basically got everything we wanted for a price we could afford.
Well, look, that's great news, because people do say it's really quite hard to find a smaller house that has room maybe for the grandchildren to stay over, little garden, flat, accessible. It's actually, there's really not a lot, given the number of people who are really thinking about this, and given our demographics, there's actually very little.
That's absolutely right. And a lot of people go for apartments for that reason, which is fine. And I'm sure that both Ralph and I said, well, this could be a 10 to 15 year proposition. And then we'd probably go to a retirement community. We also thought the good thing about this place is that if anything happened to either one of us, the other one could live there quite happily on their own. But we do have 3 bedrooms. One's a study that we share. The other is where the grandchildren and guests can stay. We've got 2 bathrooms, an ensuite off, a really tiny little ensuite off our bedroom, and then a bigger sort of family bathroom. And just one big kitchen living area, which is all we need. Huge bookshelves, which is fantastic, because I threw out 35 boxes of books when we downsized. I gave them to the book depository at Lifeline, but I got rid of them from my life. And so it's got everything we kind of wanted. And yes, we were lucky. But one of the things that is interesting, and this came, an insight came from my daughter, that what's happening now out there in, when you're looking to buy somewhere, is that families who are looking for somewhere to live, and they've got a limited budget, are looking for a house that may be a little bit too small for them, but they can afford it, and it's a sort of transition house. But they're competing against downsizers who actually often have more deeper pockets. And so there's another generational problem occurring around housing because of the competing desires of the generation that are looking to, if you like, move up in the housing market, needing more room, and those who are coming down in terms of needing less room and therefore suddenly entering a market of less expensive housing.
Yes, that's definitely happening. Now, Jane, just taking you back to, you've made the decision, you have to declutter. You mentioned 35 boxes of books. How did you approach that? Because we've talked in the series about the Swedish art of death cleaning, that approach, and there's Marie Kondo, and, did you have a method?
Not really. I just got stuck in. That's what I do, basically. I always just get stuck in. I never really have a plan. There's the task. Right, let's go at it. And I was fairly ruthless because we knew we were moving to a much smaller place. And that imposes the discipline on you. And I think that's why it's actually It is a liberating experience. I know this sounds bizarre, but it is a liberating experience because getting rid of all that accumulated stuff, and a lot of it was my kids' stuff, so I was able to say, do you want all your essays from your uni 15 years ago? Great, I can throw them out. Do you want these 5 guitars, son-in-law who is a musician? No? Great, we'll get rid of those, So there was a lot of stuff that we've just been hanging on to because, well, you can't really throw other people's stuff away however much you'd want to. But also I threw out not only the 35 boxes of books, 35 seemed to be a magic number. I threw out for 35 scented candles that had never been lit. And when I took them out and smelled them, I don't like scented candles, but people give them to you as gifts. Don't please ever give me a scented candle. 35 scented candles. So there was all sorts of accumulated, those sorts of things where you go, oh, I can't throw it away. It was given to me. And when you've got a big house, there's always the room that you put that stuff in. When you've got a small house, you have to really think quite hard. Do I want this thing I'm thinking about buying? Because where the hell am I going to put it? And if I buy it, what am I going to have to throw out to fit it in? And I quite like that. I quite like that it's cut the sort of impulse purchasing that you can do when you've got a big house and you've got eons of room to stick stuff. It's really good for you to have to think, do I really need that? Where will I put it? Actually, no. No, thanks. I won't take it. So it's oddly cutting my consumption as well, which has got to be a good thing for my bank balance, but also, for the planet in general.
What did you find, I guess, most challenging about the whole experience? Because it's a really big deal.
I found 2 things really challenging. The first was the lesser of the 2, and that was just the sheer physical exhaustion of packing up the house you've lived in for 35 years. And also we lived there the whole time. And so, real estate agents now practically redo your house before they sell it for you. And so, that was around painters and people washing the house and, recarpeting, all the stuff that they did. And so that was always renovations are difficult to live around, but we survived that. And we also had the, stylists' furniture in there. So we sort of had to camp on somebody else's furniture. That was odd. But the most stressful thing was that we bought before we sold. And we did that because we walked in and saw that house and went, this is so perfect. We can't possibly walk away from it. We're just going to take that risk. And husband was quite calm about the whole thing. But I actually got very stressed and worrying about where we're going to have bridging finance, what was going to happen, because just as we did it, everyone's talking about the market going up and it's really hard to buy anything and things get snapped up. There was an interest rate rise just after we'd bought the new house. So we knew that there was going to be a dip. And so you worry about those things. But in the end, it did not turn out to be a problem. We did sell before we had to move out. And it was all smooth sailing. But I spent, I'd say, a month waking up in the middle of the night and, doing that awful ruminating. And that's probably just me deflecting the stress of the actual leaving our, 35-year home into something very real and pragmatic, which is fairly typical of me. But once we went, I have to say, I didn't experience a twinge of nostalgia or backward looking. It was just a new adventure. It was fun. It was great seeing how our furniture fitted into the house and it started to look like ours, getting our paintings hung. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun setting up, your new place.
Oh, that's really encouraging. So as you, reflect on the whole process, what, I guess, advice would you have for other people who are just at the thinking stage of downsizing?
I would say to them, it's going to feel very daunting. You're going to think, look, it's easier and safe, I'll just stay. But I actually think whenever you make a decision, and I've always had this view in my life, whenever you make a decision that's based on, oh, I'm a bit afraid of doing that, so I won't do it, that's a shrinking decision. That's actually saying no to growing. Because every time you tackle something that's a little bit scary, that's a little bit different, that's going to take you out of your comfort zone and into a new place, that's your opportunity for growth. Inevitably, you will grow as a result of that, emotionally, experientially, in so many ways. And also you increase your own sense of self-confidence because you took something on that you thought was a little bit, and it turned out fine and you mastered it. And even if there is difficulty or problems along the way, because of course there can be, you will survive it. And that also tells you that you're stronger than you are aware. But when you always make decisions about things by saying, oh no, that might be a bit difficult, that might be a bit hard, your self-confidence has to go down because you're really saying, I'm not up to that. I can't do that. Now, if you genuinely have no desire to downsize, you really don't want to, fine, that's up to you. It's your house. Stay there as long as you like. But if you have a desire to do it, I would say don't let anxiety stop you. Feel the fear and do it anyway, because the fear is illusory, and you will probably find yourself thinking, wow, I'm glad we made that decision. And my husband's very glad because he went back to the old house to get a book that had been delivered there to the wrong address, and discovered the brush turkey is back and is wreaking mayhem in the garden. And so he said, I'm so glad we're not living there anymore, because that was doing his head in. And I think that's the thing. You gain more than you lose. And one of the most important things you gain is a sense of control over your own life, and also over your own aging, that you're accepting it, that you're accepting that your needs have changed and your needs for housing have changed. And you're not fighting that and pretending that everything's just the way it always has been, or saying, yes, but I'm too old to change. You're saying, yeah, that's fine. I'm moving into a new stage. I'm going to embrace that new stage, and I'm going to enjoy, just the same as I remember my husband and I loving our one-bedroom flat that we moved into when we were first together, and, bought a tiny little one-bedroom flat on a busy road, renovating it and loving it and enjoying setting that up for ourselves. It was just the same feeling.
Jane, that is so encouraging, and I think people will be really inspired, actually, by hearing that encouragement. And I guess to do things while you have some control and some autonomy and, a little bit of energy still. You could lift a box of books.
Too late.
Yes.
Don't leave it too late, I would say, because my body ached from all that packing and lugging and all that. But I could do it. And the other thing is, I think it is a gift to your children to do it yourself and get rid of all that accumulated stuff, because they then won't have to do it either when you've had to go into some sort of care, which could happen and very likely will happen to us all, or have passed on, where they're grieving as well as having to take on this huge effort. And so if you are thinking about it, I think it's also you're doing something where you're staying in charge rather than waiting to be dependent on your own children to do that for you.
Yes, you're quite right. It really is a gift, an act of love towards your children. Jane, it's been fabulous talking to you today. I'm glad it all worked out so well for you. And we look forward to your next book, which is coming out soon, I think.
April, 1st of April, it'll be out. It's a crime thriller. I'm calling it Rainforest Noir.
Rainforest Noir. Great. Well, we'll look forward to that. Thank you so much for joining us today on Planning for the Unexpected.
Okay, the name of the book, just in case you're interested, Lyrebird.
Lyrebird. Okay. Thank you. We'll look out for that in April. Thanks, Jane.
Thanks, Amanda.
Well, as Jane explained, it's a multi-stage process. It takes a long time. It starts with decluttering, and remember we talked about that in an earlier episode. But in the wash-up, it seemed like it all worked out for Jane.
I'm very inspired by that. I think I will get started again. I can imagine I might make it work to be able to downsize.
Yes, it just all takes time. There's no hurry. Now, as we wind up, I think we should maybe pull together some of the threads from our 6 episodes. And I think one thing that really stands out for me is that you need to start this process early. When you're feeling pretty well, when you've got autonomy, when you've got some energy. And if you start working your way through it in your earlier retirement, then you can relax a bit and take the pressure off for your later retirement when maybe, who knows, you may be less able to take it on.
Yeah, I really agree with that point of view. I think, we don't know what's going to happen in the future. So particularly health issues, we might come across health issues very suddenly. And the question is, are we organised for what happens if we suddenly are not able to care for ourselves the way we used to? And the reality is that ageing is about losing things that we always took for granted and accepting that there will be loss. It's also about being realistic about your own needs and honest about the things that you want. Just because you suddenly become single, that's not the end of your life. You can actually achieve a lot of the things that you've always wanted to do and have a valuable, worthwhile life that still contributes to society. I was thinking about that concept of Swedish death cleaning and thinking about the idea is to make it easier for your family when you pass away. You want to have a decluttered house full of the things that you really love, not just the stuff that you have been inherited from wherever. You want to have things that are easy to find for your family. You want to be surrounded by a sense of calmness and live in a way that actually is your best life, if that is possible. I think you're doing everyone a favour if you can have these things organised in your early retirement and then it doesn't matter as you get a bit older and can't manage that anymore. I think I was going to nominate 3 key takeaways from our series of podcasts. And I think it comes down to sort of 3 things. First of all, do some planning, like you said, and get your house in order, get your legal affairs in order, get your documents and papers in order. Do that in early retirement when you still have the time and the energy to do that. Second thing I would say is if you need professional help, financial, legal, health, to help you make better decisions, do that while you can still do it. And again, early in retirement when you have the energy to do it. And the third thing I guess I would say is spend time with your family and friends. Let them know you care about them and be part of their lives. And that is the best legacy that you can leave.
Well, thank you, Alice, for that excellent advice. And thank you for sharing your considerable expertise over these 6 episodes of Planning for the Unexpected. And you can find all 6 episodes on YouTube on the Older Women's Network YouTube channel. Just search Planning for the Unexpected. And this series has been presented by the Older Women's Network of New South Wales. I'm Amanda Armstrong, and it's goodbye from me.